What's this? A Northern Alliance commander asked me in early 2002 as we walked through the rubble of what had been bin Laden's hideout in Kabul. A U.S. fighter plane had flown overhead and dropped thousands of leaflets, a few of which settled on the ground near us. I picked one up. It's a note offering $25 million for information leading to the capture of Osama bin Laden, I said. The sum was written out as a numeral with an impressive string of zeros. That won't work, he said, shaking his head. You won't get any information. Why not? Well, for a start, most people in this area can't read. But beyond that, they don't believe that amount of money exists in the world. They are simple folks. If you would write, say, 100 rupees, that would be more believable, and you probably get more responses. After the Taliban refused an ultimatum from the United States government to stop harboring al-Qaeda on October 7, 2001, the U.S. military launched Operation Enduring Freedom and attacked Afghanistan. Primary strikes were launched at the capital, Kabul, at the country's main airport, Kandahar, where Mullah Omar was based, and at Jalalabad, all cities considered central to the Taliban and al-Qaeda. Supported by U.S. air cover and special operation forces, the Northern Alliance pressed forward against Taliban positions. Once the United States attack began, the leaders of different terrorist groups came together for a meeting. Among those present was representatives of al-Qaeda, Jemaah-e-Islamiyah, and the Libyan Fighting Islamic Group. Independent operatives like Abu Zubaydah and Ibn al-Sheikh al-Libi of Khalidin also participated. They all agreed to put their personal and ideological differences behind them and unite to fight the invading U.S. forces. Abdul Hadi al-Iraqi, one of al-Qaeda's military commanders, was appointed commander of all Arabs. He was assisted by Abdel al-Waqi al-Masri, one of the 1998 East Africa embassy bombing co-conspirators. Abdul Wakil toured al-Qaeda bases and instructed fighters to dig trenches around their bases. He told several al-Qaeda operatives, the United States will only attack by air and drop bombs. They won't put troops on the ground. Al-Qaeda's military preparations were premised on this assumption. When U.S. forces appeared in Afghanistan, it was a surprise to most al-Qaeda members, including Salim Hamdan, bin Laden's personal chauffeur. For years, he had sat through speeches by bin Laden in which the al-Qaeda leader had told those gathered into that the United States was a weak country that retreated when attacked. It was a shock, therefore, to see the United States responding to the attacks in New York and Washington by invading Afghanistan, and to see al-Qaeda and Taliban leaders on the run. Once the invasion began, bin Laden and his entourage kept constantly on the move, traveling between Kabul and Jalalabad, areas bin Laden was very familiar with, having lived and traveled in the region since the beginning of the Soviet jihad. At one stop in a small village, Hamdan timidly approached the al-Qaeda leader and asked for a brief leave. His wife was pregnant and ill. He promised to return. Bin Laden granted permission. With his personal driver and confidant gone, he decided to change his entourage. He realized that his life would now be that of a fugitive. While before he had been a guest of the ruling Taliban, he now needed operatives with different skills around him. The new group he picked included three of the most trusted advisors and operatives: his son Uthman, Hamza al-Ghamdi, the leader of the Northern Group, and Tawfiq bin Attash, also known as Khalid. Among the others were Khalid al-Habib, an Egyptian, Yusuf al-Khanas, a Kuwaiti, Abdul Rahman al-Taizi, a Yemeni, and Abu Saeed, a Saudi. Where the Taliban could no longer hold their lines, the foreign fighters took over security for the cities. Saif al-Adil, one of al-Qaeda's chief military operatives, was sent by bin Laden to Kandahar to help organize the defense of the city. Realizing the situation was getting increasingly dangerous, bin Laden gave the order for al-Qaeda fighters to take their families out of Afghanistan. The one leader who hadn't fled from al-Qaeda's main camps was Abu Hafs, al-Qaeda's main military commander, who was unable to travel because of his back problems. In mid-November, A U.S. airstrike leveled the house he was staying in, killing him and 7 other al-Qaeda members. One of the 7 was Zakaria al-Tunisi. One of his friends confided in Abu Zubaydah. He was involved in the 1993 battle against U.S. forces in Somalia. He had, in fact, fired the RPG that took down the U.S. helicopter in the episode that became known as Black Hawk Down. Also killed was Moaz bin Attash, the youngest member of the bin Attash family, at the time assigned to take care of the al-Qaeda's main guest house in Kandahar. After the strike killing Abu Hafs al-Masri, surviving al-Qaeda members ran to the site, removed the rubble by hand, and buried the bodies nearby. The death of Abu Hafs al-Masri was a great loss for al-Qaeda, and bin Laden personally delivered a taped eulogy from his hiding place. In late 2001, as Taliban-controlled cities began falling to the northern alliance and U.S. Special Operations Forces started hunting al-Qaeda and Taliban leaders, bin Laden gave the order for fighters to head to Tora Bora, a mountainous region in eastern Afghanistan. Located in the White Mountains near the border with Pakistan, Tora Bora's interconnected caves were well known to bin Laden and other operatives from the Soviet jihad days. The treacherous terrain and the well-hidden bunkers all but prevented easy penetration by invading forces, and the mountain range offered escape routes into Pakistan. Bin Laden knew, however, that it was just a matter of time before U.S. Special Forces, guided by Afghani allies, successfully breached the cave network. So after al-Qaeda regrouped, he ordered operatives to head into Pakistan and the lawless tribal regions. These were places into which it would be difficult for U.S. Special Forces and Northern Alliance fighters to follow them. To avoid attracting attention, bin Laden traveled with only Hamza al-Ghamdi and Kanas. Other operatives watched as bin Laden and the two walked off and disappeared into the mountains. Bin Laden's circle had just gotten smaller. When we learned about bin Laden's new entourage a few months later in Gitmo from detainees, it was clear that the key to finding al-Qaeda lay within these 2 men. These details were shared across U.S. government. The head of bin Laden's bodyguard staff, Tabaki, went with a group of 30 operatives, taking bin Laden's satellite phone with him. Among this group was the entire bin Laden security detachment, including Bahul, bin Laden's secretary, who had disbursed to each operative leading Tora Bora $100 for expenses. Every so often, Tabaki would switch on the satellite phone to put U.S. intelligence teams monitoring it on his tail rather than bin Laden's. The 30 were picked up by the Northern Alliance as they were tried to cross the border. By mid-December, the mountain range had been overrun by U.S. Special Operations Forces and their Afghan allies, but the al-Qaeda leadership was long gone. Burmel, a town in the Paktia province on the Afghan-Pakistani border, became a main transit point for the escaping Arabs. Al-Qaeda operated a safe house in this town where many al-Qaeda members stayed, including Abdul Haqi al-Iraqi, the commander of all Arab fighters in Afghanistan, his deputy, Abdul Wakil, and senior commander Abu Muhammad al-Masri. Some operatives camped in the local school. Within the group, there were debates about whether to stay in the area or head into Pakistan proper. Abu Muhammad al-Masri was against leaving and decided to stay on the Afghan border. Others, like Saif al-Adil, crossed into the tribal areas of the Pakistani side. Those who chose to leave were evacuated by the Afghani sympathizers to Banu, Pakistan. From there, operatives from the Pakistani terrorist group, the Lashkar-e-Taiba, smuggled them into Lahore, Karachi, and Faisalabad. In guest houses in Pakistan, operatives waited for instructions. Some were told to leave Pakistan to plan operations abroad. Others were told to wait for a plan to be developed for them to return to Afghanistan. While waiting, they met with Riyad al-Jazidi, al-Qaeda's travel facilitator, who made the smuggling arrangements. In the guest house where Abu Zubaydah was staying were 2 operatives with American and British passports, who told him that they wanted to launch a major operation against the United States. And with their passports, they had the ability to travel. He referred them to Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, who, following the death of Abu Hafs, had been appointed by bin Laden as head of the group's global military operations. Al-Qaeda's nature was rapidly changing. Before September 11th, the network had acted like a state in many ways. It had a highly centralized command and control structure and a defined territorial sanctuary. After the United States responded to the 9/11 attacks decisively and effectively, dismantled what was then considered al-Qaeda's center of gravity, the terrorist networks adapted. Instead of the centralized command and control that had been its trademark, it became less chief operator than chief motivator, a move that helped spur internet recruitment and domestic terrorism, a great problem faced today by the governments of the United States and other countries fighting terrorism. Terror networks' focus turned to manipulating regional, local, tribal, and sectarian conflicts in order to promote its interests. It also franchised the al-Qaeda name and encouraged other terrorist groups to places such as North Africa, Southeast Asia, and parts of the Middle East to operate under the al-Qaeda banner. Bin Laden ordered top operatives like Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, Khalid, and al-Nashiri to spread their fighters around the world and launch plots with the aim of ensuring that America would never have peace. I pledge to he who raised the skies that America will not live in peace before peace reigns in Palestine, and before all the armies of infidels depart the land of Muhammad, peace be upon him. Many al-Qaeda operatives later referred to this October 2001 statement by bin Laden as an oath from their leader. It was his pledge to continue the fight. And while Hamdan was arrested crossing back into Afghanistan, in his car was a note from Khalid Sheikh Mohammed directed to Abu Obdallah, the alias of Ramzi bin Ashib, the 9/11 plotter who had worked as the liaison between Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and head hijacker Mohammed Atta. The note instructed Abu Obaidah to send to the United States and England all available operatives with the ability to travel there. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed was planning operations in the United Kingdom and elsewhere in Europe, and he also was reactivating the network in Southeast Asia that he had worked with during the foiled Bajinka plot in 1995. Among the operatives instructed to launch attacks in the United States were Richard Reed, a British-born al-Qaeda operative who, on December 22, 2001, attempted to use a shoe bomb to blow up a plane traveling from Paris to Miami. Another place Khalid Sheikh Mohammed targeted was Tunisia, where he instructed a 24-year-old named Nizar Nawaf, also known as Saif al-Islam al-Tunisi, to plan an attack. On April 11, 2002, Nawar detonated a natural gas truck rigged with explosives at the ancient al-Gharibi synagogue, killing 21 people, including 14 German tourists, 2 French citizens, and 5 Tunisians, and injuring more than 30 others. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed focused on these areas. Nashiri was organizing attacks in the Arabian Gulf. Following the success of the bombing of the USS Cole, he had been appointed commander of al-Qaeda's naval operations. With Ahmed al-Darbi, he had set up base in Dubai and was organizing the smuggling of al-Qaeda operatives into the Gulf region using a small ship they had purchased. From there, they planned to launch operations in Yemen, Saudi Arabia, and Qatar. Al-Nashiri was also interested in attacking ships in the Strait of Gibraltar, and he had sent to Morocco 2 Saudis who had married Moroccan women, unions arranged by Abu Asim al-Maghribi. In January 2002, Nashiri was on a boat off the coast of Dubai with 4 other Yemenis, all of whom had at one point been members of bin Laden's bodyguard detachment. Now they were under Nashiri's command in his dual position as head of operations in the Arabian Peninsula and head of naval operations. The 4 were Omar Hassan Saeed Jarrallah, Fawaz Yahim Qasim al-Habibi, and Fauzi Muhammad Abdid al-Qala al-Waji. Nashiri outlined to them his plans to conduct a series of attacks in Yemen, one of which would be a naval attack similar to the bombing of the USS Cole. This time, however, al-Nashiri wanted to target an oil tanker off the coast of al-Makula in southern Yemen. Before the Cole attack, Nashiri had considered an attack on an oil tanker and had done casing for the operation, so he knew exactly what was needed. After 9/11, Abu Ali al-Harati had been chosen by bin Laden to be al-Qaeda's main representative in Yemen. He was a veteran mujahid with a strong Yemeni tribal background, which enabled him to operate with tribal protection. The cell would assist Nashiri's men in whatever way that was required. Nashiri told his operatives to get explosives for the oil tanker operation from Abu Ali, told them what else he wanted: a small boat, a villa to prepare the boat, a diner pickup truck to move the boat, fraudulent documents to purchase the boat and truck, and a place to store the explosives.